When two Hollywood legends like Sally Field and Robin Williams came together, audiences saw nothing short of magic. But the question has always lingered. What really happened behind the cameras? Was Robin his usual whirlwind of energy, unable to sit still, always bouncing from one joke to another? Or did Sally, known for her discipline and emotional depth, find herself trapped between joy and chaos when working alongside him? The truth, as Sally herself later admitted, was far more layered than the world could have imagined. Picture the montage. Sally Field standing tall in Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, portraying Miranda Hillard. The wife tried to hold her family together against Robin's unforgettable disguise. Then, cut to Robin's booming, rapid-fire voice as a genie in Aladdin, exploding with improvisation, never repeating the same joke twice, his imagination spilling out faster than animators could keep up. And finally, Sally on the stage of the Academy Awards, not once, but twice, holding Oscars for Norma Rae, 1979, and Places in the Heart, 1984, cementing her as one of Hollywood's most respected dramatic actresses. To the world, these two were icons, larger-than-life figures who embodied talent, charisma, and brilliance. But beyond the lights and applause, they were also humans, showing up to long shooting days, navigating the crushing weight of expectations, and finding ways to cope with the pressure. For Sally, working with Robin wasn't just another credit in her filmography. It was a balancing act, one that tested her patience, stretched her craft, and gave her an intimate look at a man who could turn chaos into comedy, but who also carried an invisible heaviness that few ever saw. This isn't a story of scandal or whispered secrets. It's a glimpse into what really happens when two powerful forces collide. Sally, the actress who fought for decades to be taken seriously after being dismissed as the flying nun, and Robin, the comic genius whose brilliance could light up a room even while he quietly battled his own struggles. Today, we look back at Sally Field's truth about Robin Williams' behavior on set, a story of chaos, genius, and unexpected tenderness. Sally Margaret Field was born on November 6, 1946, in Pasadena, California, into a world that looked glamorous from the outside but was marked by hardship within. Her mother, Margaret Field, was an actress who knew both the sparkle and the struggles of Hollywood, while her father, Richard Field, was a salesman. After her parents' divorce, her mother remarried Jock Mahoney, a stuntman and actor whose presence in Sally's life created deep scars. Behind the cheerful exterior of her youth, Sally endured a difficult and often painful upbringing, including emotional and physical struggles that she would not fully reveal until decades later in her memoir. These early hardships gave her a toughness that would later define her performances, a willingness to dig deep into pain and truth in order to create characters that felt real. Her path into acting began with television. At just 18 years old, she was cast as the bright, beach-loving teenager in the sitcom Gidget, 1965 to 1966. The show was short-lived, canceled after a single season, but it gave audiences their first look at Field's charm and youthful spirit. She was then launched into Flying Nun 1967 to 1970, where she played Sister Bertrille, a novice nun whose habit enabled her to literally take flight. While the show became a cultural phenomenon, it also typecast Sally in a way that nearly suffocated her career. Critics dismissed her as a lightweight TV girl, a comic gimmick with little promise of longevity. Field herself admitted that she felt trapped and belittled, unable to show the depth of talent she knew she carried. But Sally's resilience and determination carried her forward. She enrolled in acting classes, studying at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg, where she began to shed the image of the bubbly girl next door and discover her voice as a serious performer. That transformation culminated in the groundbreaking television film Sybil, 1976, where she portrayed a woman with dissociative identity disorder. The role demanded emotional honesty and an intensity that shocked critics who had underestimated her. Field's performance was nothing short of riveting, earning her an Emmy Award and silencing many of the doubts that had followed her from her sitcom days. With Sybil, Sally had proven that she was not just a TV star, but an actress of extraordinary depth. Hollywood soon took notice. Her leap into film brought her to Norma Rae in 1979, where she played a Southern textile worker who becomes a union organizer. The film was gritty, real, and emotionally charged, and Sally's portrayal struck a nerve with audiences and critics alike. Her performance earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress, a moment that marked her arrival as a serious force in American cinema. Just 5 years later, she would repeat that triumph with Places in the Heart, 1984, where she played a widow in Depression-era Texas, struggling to keep her farm and family alive. The role won her a second Oscar and gave rise to her famous acceptance speech. "You like me. Right now, you like me." By the mid-1980s, Sally Field was no longer seen as the perky TV girl or the flying nun. She had carved out a reputation as one of Hollywood's most serious and respected actresses. She was known for her discipline, her dedication to craft, and her ability to bring raw, emotional truth to every role. Unlike many stars who coasted on charisma, Sally worked tirelessly to inhabit her characters, grounding them in lived reality. This background is crucial in understanding what it meant for her to later work alongside Robin Williams. Sally was a performer forged by discipline and determination, an actress who had battled to be taken seriously. Robin, in contrast, was a whirlwind, chaotic, unpredictable, and endlessly improvisational. Where Sally valued structure, Robin thrived in breaking it apart. Their time together on set would not only highlight this contrast, but also create a fascinating dynamic that both tested and enriched Sally's craft. It was a collision of two very different artistic worlds, one rooted in control, the other in chaos. Robin McLaurin Williams was born on July 21, 1951, in Chicago, Illinois, into a family that seemed comfortably secure but left him often searching for connection. His father, Robert Fitzgerald Williams, was a senior executive at Ford, while his mother, Lori, was a former model from New Orleans. As a boy, Robin was shy, quiet, and deeply intelligent. Though he would one day become known as a nonstop talker, his early years were marked by solitude. He often entertained himself for hours at a time, playing with dozens of toy soldiers in his large home. This private world of imagination was where his creativity began to bloom. Beneath the quiet surface, however, there was already the restless spark of a performer. As he grew older, Robin discovered that humor was his passport into human connection. He attended high school in California, where his ability to make classmates laugh turned him from the shy boy into the life of the room. That spark carried him into acting school and ultimately into stand-up comedy, where his style erupted into something audiences had never seen before. Robin didn't just tell jokes. He became a human tornado, switching characters, accents, and voices in a blur so fast that even his fellow comedians were left stunned. On stage, he seemed incapable of stopping, as if a fire burned inside him that words and movement alone could barely contain. That manic energy became his signature, and it propelled him into television. His big break came in 1978 with Mork and Mindy, where he played the alien Mork from Ork. The role allowed him to unleash his improvisational brilliance in every episode. What was written on the page was only a starting point. Robin would take scenes in directions no one expected, leaving co-stars laughing and struggling to keep up. America fell in love with his unpredictability, and overnight, he became a household name. But fame did not erase the darkness inside. Through the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Robin struggled with addiction. Cocaine and alcohol became part of his life, even as his career soared. He formed friendships with fellow comedians and actors who were also lost in the same battles, and tragedy struck when his close friend John Belushi died of an overdose in 1982. That loss shocked Robin into rethinking his own life, forcing him to face the cost of his relentless pace and the substances he used to fuel it. Even through the struggles, Robin reinvented himself again and again. He transitioned from television into film, proving that his manic comedy could also be paired with depth and emotion. In Good Morning Vietnam 1987, he portrayed radio DJ Adrian Cronar, blending his unstoppable humor with the backdrop of war. The performance earned him critical acclaim and an Academy Award nomination. Just 2 years later, in Dead Poets Society 1989, he showed the world a softer, more profound side as English teacher John Keating, inspiring students to seize a day. The film became iconic, and Robin's reputation as not just a comedian, but a serious actor was solidified. His career only expanded in the 1990s. He lent his voice to the genie in Disney's Aladdin in 1992, a performance so explosive that the animators had to bend their artwork to keep up with him. He delivered heartfelt comedy in Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, and he reached the peak of dramatic recognition with his Academy Award-winning performance in Good Will Hunting, 1997, where he played therapist Sean McGuire with quiet wisdom and heartbreaking humanity. What made Robin so remarkable was his unpredictability. On one hand, he could command a room with manic energy, improvising until no one could breathe from laughter. On the other, he could stop everything with a single look, a soft line, or a moment of silence that carried enormous weight. This duality made him one of the most unique performers Hollywood had ever seen. It also made his collaboration with Sally Field so fascinating. Where Robin thrived in chaos, Sally had built her career on discipline and control. She was grounded, thoughtful, and deliberate. He was quick, improvisational, and mercurial. The tension between their styles would become a defining aspect of their work together on Mrs. Doubtfire. For audiences, that contrast was magic. For Sally, it was both a challenge and a revelation about the man behind the whirlwind. The story that brought Sally Field and Robin Williams together began with a book, Alias Madame Doubtfire, a 1987 novel by and Fine, told the tale of a divorced father who disguises himself as a female housekeeper to spend more time with his children. Hollywood saw its potential as both a comedy and a heartfelt family story, and the rights were quickly acquired. Director Chris Columbus, who had already helmed family hits like Home Alone, believed it could become something special if the casting was perfect. At the heart of the story was Daniel Hillard, the father whose devotion to his children drives him to the outrageous disguise of Mrs. Doubtfire. For this role, there was only one choice, Robin Williams. His ability to shift voices, improvise endlessly, and inhabit characters at lightning speed made him tailor-made for the part. The dual role, bumbling but loving father and eccentric Scottish nanny, allowed Robin to display both his comedic genius and his deep well of emotion. Columbus trusted that Robin could make audiences laugh uncontrollably and then, in the very next moment, bring them to tears. The other key role was Miranda Hillard, Daniel's ex-wife. The story demanded that she not be a villain, but a believable, sympathetic woman torn between frustration and love, trying to protect her children while dealing with the chaos Robin's character created. Columbus knew the film needed an actress with gravity, someone who could hold her ground opposite Robin's tornado of comedy. That actress was Sally Field. By 1993, Sally was already a Hollywood institution. She had 2 Academy Awards, an Emmy, and decades of experience that proved her seriousness and range. Casting her was not just about prestige, it was about balance. Where Robin was wild and unpredictable, Sally was controlled and deeply grounded. The contrast between them would mirror the story itself. A man who refused to play by the rules and a woman trying to create stability in a fractured family. When filming began, the pairing immediately sparked interest. Sally's Miranda wasn't just a straight character against Robin's comedy. She brought strength and depth to the role. She made Miranda realistic, a woman who had reached her breaking point but still carried love and vulnerability. And opposite her, Robin exploded with disguises, voices, and ad-libs that stretched every scene far beyond the script. Sally later admitted that her first impressions of Robin were mixed. He was, as she described it, exhausting but magnetic. He could shift the energy of an entire room just by walking in, and while it was impossible not to be pulled into his orbit, it was also overwhelming to keep pace. Robin's behavior on set was often unpredictable, and while that delighted the crew and kept the atmosphere alive, it also tested her discipline as an actress who preferred structure. Yet, this tension is exactly what made their on-screen relationship so believable. Miranda needed to be the anchor while Daniel/Mrs. Doubtfire spun out of control. And in real life, Sally and Robin embodied those same qualities. The chaos of his comedy and the steadiness of her craft merged into something unforgettable. The casting was not just clever, it was inspired. Together, they created a film that was more than a comedy. It was a portrait of love, family, and resilience. For Sally, the experience was unlike any other in her career. For Robin, it was another chance to prove he could be both outrageous and deeply human. And for audiences, their pairing was the heart of Mrs. Doubtfire's enduring magic. The set of Mrs. Doubtfire was unlike any Sally Field had ever experienced, and that was entirely because of Robin Williams. For Sally, who had spent her career carefully constructing characters and respecting the disciplined performance. Robin's approach felt both exhilarating and maddening. Every day brought the same challenge. How do you keep up a man who simply couldn't stop creating? Robin's improvisational style was legendary long before Mrs. Doubtfire. He had built his career by ignoring boundaries and rewriting the rules of comedy. On set, that meant the script was never truly finished. If a scene was scheduled for 2 hours, it might stretch to 6 because Robin could not resist exploring every possible version. He would shift voices mid-line, invent new jokes on the spot, or spin a single moment into a dozen different takes. For the crew, this was both a blessing and a curse. Director Chris Columbus encouraged Robin's freedom, but also meant hours of film ended up on the cutting room floor. Columbus later admitted they had enough material to create multiple versions of the movie, each with entirely different jokes. For Sally, the challenge was personal. She was an actress who valued preparation, who believed in finding the truth of a character and holding to it. Robin, in contrast, thrived on spontaneity, often blowing past the boundaries of the script. Sally once admitted that it was nearly impossible to keep a straight face around him. In serious scenes, she would try to stay grounded, but Robin's antics could break her composure in seconds. She found herself stifling laughter, biting her lip, or looking away just to avoid ruining a take. The more she resisted, the harder Robin pushed, delighted to see how far he could go before she cracked. Yet beneath her occasional frustration was a deep admiration. Sally understood that Robin's chaos wasn't careless. It was his art. He wasn't ignoring the script to be difficult. He was searching for something alive, something that couldn't be written in advance. His improvisations gave scenes a rawness that kept them from feeling staged. Even when Sally struggled to hold her ground, she recognized that his genius was unfolding in real time. The crew had countless stories of Robin's improvisational storms. Makeup artists recalled how he would stay in character as Mrs. Doubtfire for hours, even between takes, greeting people with a Scottish lilt and motherly warmth until they forgot it was him under the prosthetics. Camera operators laughed that they never knew what angle to prepare for, because Robin might leap across the set or shift into a dozen different voices in a single breath. For some, the chaos was exhausting. For others, it was a highlight of their careers. This delicate balance between Robin's freedom and Sally's discipline became the core of the film's chemistry. Miranda, Sally's character, was meant to be the steady center, while Daniel/Mrs. Doubtfire whirled around her in disguise. On screen, the audience saw a mother try and protect her family against a father's wild schemes. Off-screen, the dynamic wasn't much different. Sally anchored the story with emotional truth, while Robin spun out in every direction. The tension between them was not manufactured. It was real, and it gave their scenes a spark that couldn't have been written. One of the most striking examples came during the courtroom sequence, one of the film's most emotional moments. Sally had to deliver a performance rooted in heartbreak and frustration, showing the toll the separation had taken on her character. Robin, meanwhile, couldn't resist injecting humor even into rehearsals, improvising endlessly in ways that shifted the tone. For Sally, holding that emotional space while Robin explored his impulses was both exhausting and inspiring. She later reflected that the scene worked precisely because of their differences. She remained firmly in the moment, while Robin pushed the boundaries, and the collision of those styles made the heartbreak even more powerful. Despite the difficulties, Sally never spoke of the experience with resentment. If anything, she described Robin as a force of nature. Overwhelming, yes, but unforgettable. She saw in him a man who carried a burden even as he spread laughter. His behavior on set wasn't just about jokes. It was a way of filling every space with light, so that no one noticed the shadows he lived with. Sally respected that. She may have been the disciplined one, but she understood the courage it took for Robin to live at that speed. The result of their collaboration was undeniable. The tension that sometimes tested Sally's patience created a realism on screen. The laughter, the exhaustion, the friction, all of it translated into performances that resonated with millions. Audiences believed in Miranda's exasperation and Daniel's relentless attempts to win her back because, in many ways, those emotions mirrored the real push and pull between Sally and Robin as actors. In the end, the set of Mrs. Doubtfire wasn't just a workplace. For Sally, it became a classroom in which she witnessed a different kind of genius. Messy, unpredictable, and impossible to contain. Robin may have made her job harder, but he also made the story unforgettable. Their differences didn't weaken the film. They made it a classic. In the years after Mrs. Doubtfire, Sally Field was often asked about her experience working alongside Robin Williams. Her reflections carried a mixture of awe, affection, and lingering sadness. To her, Robin wasn't just a co-star. He was a phenomenon. She described him as a lightning bolt. On set, a force of nature that couldn't be controlled or contained. His energy was relentless, sparking in every direction, impossible to predict, and yet mesmerizing to watch. Working with him, she once said, was like trying to tether a balloon in a hurricane. It was exhilarating, but it also demanded every ounce of focus she had. What struck Sally most wasn't just Robin's improvisational brilliance, though that was undeniable. It was his generosity. On set, Robin gave himself completely, not only to the work but to the people around him. He had a remarkable ability to connect with children during the long days of filming. Sally noticed how he made sure the young actors, Mara Wilson, Lisa Jacob, and Matthew Lawrence, were always comfortable. He treated them as equals, respecting their instincts while also showering them with laughter. For a movie centered on the love between a father and his children, Robin's real-life warmth toward the kids brought an authenticity that no script could manufacture. Sally admired that deeply. She had built her reputation on discipline and craft, on digging into the emotional truth of her characters. And she recognized that Robin's gift was different but just as vital. Were she carefully prepared, he exploded with spontaneity. Yet both approaches led to the same goal, to reveal something real to the audience. In their differences, Sally found profound respect for him. Still, she also saw something else, something not everyone could see. Behind the constant humor and the endless stream of jokes, Sally sensed a sadness in Robin. It wasn't something he ever put into word with her, but it was there in fleeting moments when the laughter stopped and quiet settled in. She later hinted that Robin carried a heaviness he tried to mask with his comedy, and that his wild energy wasn't only about joy. It was also about survival. Humor was his shield, his way of keeping pain at bay. And Sally, having lived her own battles, recognized the fragility beneath the performance. For Sally, that duality defined her experience with him. He could light up a room so completely that everyone forgot their troubles, yet she knew that when the lights dimmed, Robin's own troubles remained. She never described him as unreliable or difficult. Quite the opposite. She called him kind, caring, and endlessly generous. But she also acknowledged that there was a complexity to him that went far beyond the laughter. To her, Robin wasn't just a comic genius the world adored. He was a man fighting to balance light and darkness within himself. When asked years later about her memories of filming Mrs. Doubtfire, Sally often smiled, recalling how Robin's antics made it nearly impossible to keep a straight face. She laughed about the dozens of ruined takes because of his ad-libbing, about the way he could derail a serious scene with a single unexpected word. But then her tone would shift, softening as she reflected on what it was like to be in his presence. She described working with Robin not as a burden, but as a privilege, a chance to witness genius in motion, even if that genius was fueled by storms most people never knew he carried. Her reflections weren't nostalgic in the usual Hollywood sense. Sally didn't exaggerate their friendship or claim closeness that wasn't there. Instead, she spoke of Robin with honesty. She admired him, respected him, and understood, perhaps more than most, that his behavior on set came from a complicated place. He wasn't just making people laugh. He was also holding his own demons at bay. That understanding gave Sally's words about him a weight that others' recollections sometimes lacked. She didn't describe him simply as funny or kind. She painted a fuller picture, a man who was larger than life, whose brilliance dazzled everyone, but whose humanity was marked by fragility. Her admiration came not only from his talent, but from the knowledge that he gave so much of himself, even when it cost him. Looking back, Sally's truth about Robin Williams was simple but profound. Working with him was exhausting, unpredictable, and unlike anything she had ever experienced. Yet it was also unforgettable. For her, he would always remain the lightning bolt, a spark of brilliance impossible to hold, impossible to forget. By the time Mrs. Doubtfire went into production in 1993, Robin Williams was enjoying one of the brightest periods of his career. He had already earned acclaim for Good Morning, Vietnam and Dead Poets Society, had enchanted audiences as the genie in Aladdin, and was widely regarded as one of the most beloved performers in the world. On the surface, Robin seemed unstoppable, his star power unmatched, his comedy sharper than ever, his films dominating the box office. Yet even in this season of success, he carried with him an inner battle that never truly left. Robin had long been open about his struggles with addiction. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, at the height of his early fame, he fell into cocaine and alcohol abuse. The sudden death of his friend John Belushi in 1982 served as a wake-up call, and Robin sought sobriety soon after. But the shadows of those years lingered. Sobriety did not erase the loneliness, nor did it quiet the gnawing sense of restlessness that seemed to follow him everywhere. He often admitted that comedy wasn't just a job for him. It was a way of coping, a way to distract himself from the emptiness that sometimes crept in when the laughter faded. On the set of Mrs. Doubtfire, Sally Field could sense this duality. Robin was electric, unstoppable, constantly making the cast and crew roar with laughter. Yet she also noticed the quiet moments, the brief pauses when he seemed distant, as though the weight of life pressed harder than he let on. For Sally, who approached acting with discipline and depth, those glimpses revealed the truth. Robin's comedy wasn't simply born from joy. It was also a survival mechanism. Humor became the mask he wore to hide pain, the shield he lifted so the world would never see his vulnerabilities too clearly. In their dynamic, Sally's steadiness often provided balance. While Robin spun into endless improvisations, Sally anchored the scenes with emotional clarity, keeping the story grounded even when he veered into wild detours. That balance was not only important for the film, but also, in subtle ways, for Robin himself. Sally's seriousness, her focus on truth and restraint, may have offered him a sense of stability. Where he brought chaos, she brought order. Where he thrived on unpredictability, she provided structure. It was an unspoken exchange of energy that made their pairing so powerful, on screen and off. Despite their very different styles, respect was at the heart of their working relationship. Sally never dismissed Robin's antics as self-indulgent, because she understood that they were part of his brilliance and also part of his struggle. Robin, in turn, respected Sally's craft, knowing she was a rare co-star who could withstand his whirlwind while still delivering authenticity. The two were not mirror images, but they were complementary forces, and that is why Mrs. Doubtfire struck such a chord. Behind the laughter, Robin was a man at war with himself, constantly trying to keep the darker corners of his mind from swallowing him. Sally, though not someone he confided in deeply, recognized those shadows and never judged him for them. Instead, she carried a quiet understanding that made their time together more than just a professional collaboration. She saw him not just as a comic genius adored by millions, but as a human being searching for peace in the middle of his storm. When Mrs. Doubtfire was released in 1993, it became far more than just another family comedy. It was a phenomenon. The film earned over $440 million worldwide, making it one of the year's biggest hits, and it struck a chord with audiences across generations. Children loved the disguise and the slapstick humor, while adults recognized the deeper themes of divorce, parenting, and the ache of separation. At the center of it all were Robin Williams and Sally Field, whose dynamic gave the film both heart and tension. For Sally, the success of the movie validated the challenges of working with Robin's whirlwind style. She had spent countless hours on set struggling to keep her composure as he improvised take after take. But when she finally saw the finished product, she understood why it had all been worth it. Robin's performance didn't just make people laugh. It made them feel. Sally praised him for transforming what could have been a light-hearted children's film into a story that resonated with adults, touching on complexities of family life with honesty and warmth. Though Sally and Robin didn't become inseparable friends after the movie, the impact of their time together stayed with her. In interviews years later, she admitted that Robin's presence never really left her. He was unforgettable, not simply because of his talent, but because of the way he filled every space with life. She remembered the exhaustion, yes, but she also remembered the laughter, the kindness he showed to the young cast members, and the sense that she had witnessed something rare, a performer who gave absolutely everything of himself to every moment. For Robin, Mrs. Doubtfire became one of his most beloved roles. Fans adored him as the mischievous, devoted father willing to go to impossible lengths for his children. The film cemented his reputation not just as a comedian, but as an actor who could deliver humor wrapped in deep emotion. Many of his admirers later said that Daniel Hiller was a role in which they saw Robin most clearly. Funny, frantic, but also vulnerable and full of love. The movie also shaped Sally's career in a unique way. She was already a 2-time Oscar winner, respected for her serious dramatic roles. But Mrs. Doubtfire gave her a place in the hearts of a younger generation who might not have known her earlier work. To many, she wasn't Norma Ray or the resilient mother from Places in the Heart. She was Miranda, the ex-wife trying to protect her children while struggling with her own conflicted feelings. That character became one of her most remembered, and Sally later admitted that the role brought her recognition from audiences around the world in a way few others had. The lasting impression of their collaboration was not defined by a lifelong friendship or constant contact, but by a mutual respect that endured. Sally never spoke of Robin with anything less than admiration, and Robin often credited his co-stars for grounding his performances. Their partnership, fleeting though it was, resulted in a film that continues to resonate decades later. For Sally, the experience of Mrs. Doubtfire was a reminder how opposites can create magic together, discipline meeting chaos, seriousness meeting spontaneity. For Robin, it was one more testament to his unique ability to take a simple premise and make it unforgettable. The legacy of the film lies not only in its box office numbers, but in the way it continues to comfort, entertain, and inspire audiences to this day. The world was stunned on August 11th, 2014, when news broke that Robin Williams had died by suicide at the age of 63. For millions, the loss felt impossible to grasp. Robin wasn't just a celebrity. He was a source of joy, someone who had filled living rooms, theaters, and hearts with laughter for decades. The truth, as his family later revealed, was that Robin had been suffering from Lewy body dementia, a cruel and little understood neurological disease that causes severe depression, anxiety, hallucinations, and cognitive decline. It had quietly taken hold of him in his final years, leaving him frightened, disoriented, and overwhelmed. For Sally Field, the news was devastating. She had known Robin not as a distant star, but as the unstoppable force she had worked alongside during the making of Mrs. Doubtfire. In interviews following his passing, she spoke of him with both admiration and sorrow. To Sally, Robin was not just a comedian, but a whirlwind of energy, someone impossible to contain, who left everyone around him better for having been in his orbit. And yet, she acknowledged a painful truth. Behind the brilliance was suffering that even those closest to him couldn't always see. Sally reflected on how Robin had an almost magical ability to make people laugh in the darkest times. On set, he could turn tension into joy with a single word or an outrageous improvisation. To the world, that gift seemed inexhaustible, as if Robin's well-humor could never run dry. But Sally understood that his constant energy came at a cost. She had sensed, even during Mrs. Doubtfire, that his laughter was sometimes a shield, a way to push back against a sadness he didn't want to show. His ability to lift others was unmatched, but also meant he carried the weight of keeping that light alive, even when it dimmed within himself. When she remembered Robin after his death, Sally didn't speak in cliches. She didn't reduce him to a tragic figure, nor did she gloss over the reality of his pain. Instead, she honored both sides of him, the genius who electrified every set and every stage, and the man who quietly bore burdens most people never realized. She described him as someone who could fill the room with light and still be carrying darkness inside. Her words resonated because they were not only about Robin, but also about the paradox of so many performers who give the world joy while fighting battles of their own. The world's reaction to Robin's death was immediate and overwhelming. Fans gathered outside his home, leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Tributes poured in from fellow actors, comedians, and world leaders alike. Social media became a global vigil, with millions sharing memories of the movie's characters and moments that had defined their childhoods or carried them through hard times. Robin had been so many things to so many people. The irreverent alien from Mork and Mindy, the inspiring teacher at Dead Poet Society, the wisecracking genie in Aladdin, the soulful psychologist in Good Will Hunting, and of course, the devoted father disguised as a nanny in Mrs. Doubtfire. Sally's voice joined the chorus of those mourning, but her perspective carried a special weight. She hadn't just admired Robin from afar. She had worked with him in close quarters, felt his energy firsthand, and seen how his brilliance shaped every moment. To her, his death was not just a loss to cinema, but the silencing of a rare, irreplaceable spirit. She spoke of him with heartbreak, describing the pain of watching someone so gifted leave the world in such anguish. In the end, Robin's passing reminded everyone of the fragility of even the brightest lights. For Sally Field, his memory was not defined by the tragedy, but by the fullness of who he was. The chaos and the kindness, the genius and the struggle. As she put it, Robin was a whirlwind, one who gave everything he had to make others smile, even as he wrestled with storms of his own. Today, Sally Field stands as one of Hollywood's most respected and enduring figures. With a career spanning more than 6 decades, she has grown from the wide-eyed teenager in Gidget and the flying nun into an actress known for her depth, honesty, and resilience. She continues to work steadily, earning critical acclaim in recent projects, while also being honored with Lifetime Achievement Awards, including recognition from the Screen Actors Guild and the Kennedy Center. Beyond the accolades, Sally has remained deeply candid about her life. In her 2018 memoir In Pieces, she opened up about her childhood, her struggles with self-worth, and the many challenges she faced both on and off screen. She has never shied away from the truth, even when it was difficult to tell. Part of her openness comes from the people who shaped her journey, fellow actors, directors, and friends who left an imprint on her life. Robin Williams is one of those names she recalls with particular tenderness. When she speaks of him today, it is not to recount scandals or tabloid stories, but to remember the laughter, the generosity, and the energy that made their time on Mrs. Doubtfire unforgettable. To Sally, Robin wasn't simply a co-star. He was a reminder what happens when brilliance and brokenness share the same space, when a man who could bring joy to millions carried private battles no one could fully see. Sally has admitted that Robin's presence has never really left her. She remembers him as a lightning bolt, impossible to contain, exhausting at times but endlessly magnetic. She remembers the way he lit up the young cast members with kindness, how he turned every pause on set into a moment of comedy, and how he carried an undercurrent of sadness beneath all the chaos. Those memories, though bittersweet, remain among the most meaningful of her long career. For Sally, Robin's story is both an inspiration and a caution. He proved that genius can come wrapped in contradictions, that the man who could make the world laugh the loudest was also the one suffering in silence. She doesn't recall him as a tragic figure defined only by his death, but as a whole human being, brilliant, flawed, generous, and unforgettable. As she reflects on her life today, Sally carries Robin with her, not as a shadow of pain, but as a reminder of the delicate balance between light and darkness. His memory is woven into her story, not because of scandal, but because of the joy and humanity he brought to her life. When people hear the phrase, Sally Field opens up about Robin Williams' behavior on set, they might expect tales of scandal, of a co-star too wild to handle, of complaints about chaos behind the cameras. But Sally's truth has never been that simple. What she revealed over the years was not gossip, but an honest portrait of what it was like to work with a man who was both unstoppable and unforgettable. Robin Williams was a storm of energy, a comic tornado who could spin a single line into 1,000 variations before the director ever called cut. He was exhausting, impossible to pin down, and constantly challenging the discipline of his fellow actors. For someone like Sally Field, trained in careful preparation and known for her ability to dig into emotional truth, Robin's presence was both a test and a gift. He pulled her out of her comfort zone, forcing her to respond not just to the script, but to the unpredictable brilliance happening right in front of her. Sally often admitted that working with Robin was like trying to tether a balloon in a hurricane. It demanded patience, focus, and sometimes sheer willpower just to stay in character. And yet, she never described it with resentment. What she remembered was the laughter, the kindness, the generosity he showed, especially to the children on set. What stayed with her wasn't the exhaustion of keeping up, but the privilege of having witnessed genius at its most raw and unfiltered. Her reflections remind us that Robin's behavior wasn't rooted only in joy. He carried with him an undercurrent of sadness, a heaviness that he worked tirelessly to hide with humor. Sally sensed it, even if he never spoke of it. She understood that the same whirlwind that made him dazzling also came from a place of fragility. He made others laugh because he needed them to laugh. He gave himself completely to the moment because stillness was hard to bear, and she respected him for that, perhaps even more than for the comedy itself. Together, Robin and Sally created something timeless. Mrs. Doubtfire wasn't just funny. It was heartfelt, resonating with children and adults alike. The chemistry between Robin's chaos and Sally's calm gave the story authenticity. Audiences believed Miranda's exasperation and Daniel's desperate devotion because, in many ways, those emotions reflected the real push and pull of their working relationship. The film remains beloved because it holds both truths: the hilarity of Robin's improvisation and the grounding sincerity of Sally's performance. In the years since Robin's death, Sally has continued to carry his memory with grace. She does not recall him as a tragic headline, but as a rare soul who gave more of himself than anyone could ask. Her words about him have always been tinged with admiration, with honesty, and with a quiet recognition that brilliance and brokenness often live side by side. And that may be the deeper truth in her reflections. Robin Williams was not simply a comedian. He was a man who filled the world with light, while carrying shadows of his own. Sally Field was not just a serious actress who anchored his chaos. She was a witness to both his genius and his humanity. In the end, their story reminds us that behind laughter there can be pain, and behind discipline there can be compassion. For Sally, Robin wasn't just a co-star. He was a reminder that genius often comes wrapped in unpredictability, and that love, laughter, and loss are forever intertwined.